There are seasons in life where relationships we thought would last forever suddenly come to an end. It could be a friend who walks away, a partner who chooses a different path, or even family ties that grow distant. In those moments, the heart asks questions: why did this happen? Did I do something wrong? Could I have fixed it? But often, when God ends a relationship, it is not punishment, it is preparation. God removes what is no longer aligned with your destiny so He can place the right people, opportunities, and blessings in your path. The end is never the end when God is involved. It is the beginning of something higher. When a relationship comes to an end, it often leaves us wrestling with confusion, disappointment, and pain. We question the reasons, replay moments in our minds, and sometimes even blame ourselves. But one of the most important truths to hold on to in those moments is that God sees what you cannot see. Our vision is limited to the present moment, but His eyes scan both past and future. He knows the hidden motives of the heart, the unseen traps in the path ahead, and the weight that certain relationships would bring if they were allowed to continue. What appears to us as loss may actually be an act of divine protection. God does not end things in our lives without purpose, and many times His purpose is to guard us from heartbreak or distraction that we could never have predicted. We see only a small portion of life, like looking through a keyhole, while God holds the full picture. That is why relationships that seem right in the moment can sometimes collapse without warning. It is not because God is cruel or because He wants us to suffer. It is because He sees the future impact of that connection in ways we never could. Perhaps the person was not trustworthy. Perhaps their heart carried intentions that would eventually harm us. Or maybe they were simply not meant to walk the path of destiny God has designed for us. It is difficult to see this clearly in the midst of heartbreak, but over time, we often realize that the ending was mercy in disguise. There are moments when God closes a door to prevent us from stepping into something destructive. Think of it this way: a child might reach for fire because the light attracts them, but the parent pulls their hand away. To the child, it feels like a harsh interruption, but the parent knows the danger that lies ahead. In the same way, when God ends a relationship, it may feel unfair, sudden, or painful, but He sees the fire that would have burned us had the connection continued. He is a father who protects His children, even when they do not understand His actions in the moment. Sometimes God's protection comes disguised as loss because what we desired is not what will sustain us in the long run. A relationship can seem good outwardly, filled with charm, kindness, or comfort, but God sees beneath the surface. He sees character traits that could erode our peace, patterns of behavior that would wound our hearts, and compromises that would weaken our faith. He does not only look at what the relationship is today, He looks at what it will become tomorrow. By ending it early, He saves us from a storm we would not have survived emotionally or spiritually. This is why trust is so essential. Trust is not just believing God in the light. It is holding on to Him in the dark when the path is unclear and the pain is real. Believing that He sees what we cannot see allows us to release the grip on relationships He has removed. Without that trust, we can easily fall into bitterness, constantly wishing things had turned out differently, all the while missing the greater gift of God's protection. An example that illustrates this truth well is the story of a young woman who was engaged to be married. Everything seemed perfect from the outside. Her fiancé was admired by her friends, respected by her family, and the wedding plans were already in motion. But a few months before the ceremony, he suddenly ended the relationship without clear explanation. The heartbreak was crushing, and she felt humiliated and abandoned. For years, she struggled to understand why God allowed her heart to break so deeply. Yet several years later, she learned that the man had developed destructive habits and made choices that damaged his life. The relationship ending had spared her from entering a marriage that would have led to years of pain and instability. In hindsight, what she once called tragedy, she began to recognize as divine protection. God had seen what she could not see, and though it hurt in the moment, His wisdom had preserved her future. When we remember that God's perspective is greater than ours, it shifts the way we see endings. We no longer view them as rejection, but as redirection. We begin to trust that if God allowed a relationship to close, then He is guiding us towards something healthier, more aligned, and more fruitful. His love does not always reveal the why immediately, but it always ensures that what is ahead will be better than what was lost. So the next time you feel the sting of a relationship ending, pause before you let despair take root. Remind yourself that God is not blind to your tears, nor is He careless with your heart. He sees every hidden thing, the dangers, the future outcomes, the motives you could not have detected. And because He sees what you cannot see, you can walk forward with faith that His decision was not to harm you, but to protect you and prepare you for greater blessings ahead. There are moments in life when someone walks away and everything in you wants to hold on. You replay the memories, you question what went wrong, and you wonder if you could have done something different. Yet when a relationship ends, there is often a deeper purpose at work. Separation creates space for growth. Sometimes God removes people not because they were bad, but because their season in your life has been fulfilled. The absence they leave behind becomes the very soil where new strength, clarity, and faith can take root. When you are tied to relationships that are not aligned with your future, you can find yourself weighed down, unable to step into the fullness of what God has prepared. Letting go is rarely easy, but it is often necessary for the kind of growth that will shape you into who you are called to be. Growth requires space. A plant cannot flourish if it is crowded by weeds or kept in a pot that is too small. The same principle applies to our lives. When we cling to relationships that God has already called to an end, we unknowingly limit our capacity. The constant noise, the divided focus, the emotional drain, all of these can keep us from developing the depth of character and strength of spirit we need for the next chapter. God, in His wisdom, allows certain separations to occur because He knows that growth cannot happen in a place of stagnation. He knows that as long as you are tied to the wrong people, you will never fully discover who you are in Him. Separation also teaches you to depend more deeply on God. When you lose someone you leaned on, the gap they leave becomes an invitation to lean harder on Him. In that reliance, your faith deepens, your prayers become more honest, and your trust grows stronger. Often, the times of loneliness and loss are the very times when God reveals Himself most powerfully. He shows you that He is enough, and in doing so, He builds in you a resilience and confidence that no person could ever provide. The pain of separation becomes a classroom where faith matures, vision sharpens, and character is refined. Another dimension of growth that separation brings is clarity about who you are and where you are going. Sometimes the presence of the wrong people clouds your perception. You compromise to keep them. You silence your convictions to avoid conflict, or you limit your dreams so they feel comfortable. But when that tie is broken, you suddenly see with new eyes. Dreams you buried start to resurface. Passions you ignored begin to breathe again. Without the constant pull of someone else's expectations, you rediscover your voice and your direction. What seemed like emptiness at first becomes fertile ground for a renewed sense of purpose. It is important to understand that separation is not always about fault. It doesn't mean the other person was evil or you were inadequate. It often simply means that their role in your journey has ended. Just as a teacher in school prepares you for the next grade and then steps aside, some relationships exist to prepare you for a specific season. When that lesson is complete, the separation comes so that you can carry what you've learned into the next stage. Trying to drag someone beyond the point they were meant to go only leads to frustration. Releasing them, however painful, allows you to embrace what lies ahead. Consider the example of a young man who had a circle of friends that he had known since childhood. They grew up together, shared laughs, and supported each other through many seasons. But as he matured, he began to sense a deeper calling in his life. He wanted to pursue education, expand his vision, and live with greater discipline. His friends, however, preferred a life of comfort and distraction, avoiding responsibility and resisting change. At first, he tried to balance both worlds, but the tension grew heavier. Eventually, some of those friendships drifted apart. It was painful, like losing a part of himself. But in that separation, he discovered focus. Without the constant pull to remain the same, he was free to grow. In time, his discipline opened doors of opportunity. His vision became clearer, and he matured into a leader others could look up to. The separation, though painful, created the very space that allowed him to grow into his calling. This is what God does with us. He allows certain relationships to end not to wound us, but to make room for what is greater. Subtraction becomes a divine strategy. By removing what is holding you back, He multiplies your strength, wisdom, and capacity. The pain of separation is real, but it is not wasted. It becomes the soil where growth takes root. In time, you will look back and see that what you thought was loss was actually preparation, and what you thought was emptiness was actually expansion. Not every relationship that enters your life is meant to stay forever. Some people are placed in your path for a short season to teach you something, to help you grow, or to walk with you through a particular chapter. It is easy to assume that every person who shows up and brings joy, encouragement, or companionship will be a lifelong companion, but life rarely works that way. Many relationships are assignments for a season, not covenants for a lifetime. When God allows a relationship to end, it is often His way of showing that the purpose of that connection has been fulfilled. Confusing temporary relationships with permanent ones can lead to unnecessary frustration, disappointment, and even delay in your destiny. The distinction between seasonal and covenant relationships is critical. A covenant relationship is built to last. These are the people God intends to stand with you in both triumph and trial, those who share not only your present, but your purpose. Covenant relationships endure storms, misunderstandings, and change because they are knit together by something stronger than convenience or emotion. But seasonal relationships are different. They serve a specific purpose for a specific time. They can bring joy, wisdom, and growth, but when that time has passed, they naturally fade away. Problems arise when you hold on to seasonal people as though they are covenant people, forcing a connection that God has already released. When God ends a relationship, it does not always mean betrayal or failure. It often means completion. That person played the role they were sent to play, and the chapter of your story that included them has closed. Holding on to them past their season can create stagnation. You may feel drained, misunderstood, or constantly trying to repair something that is not meant to last. Recognizing the difference frees you from unnecessary battles and allows you to receive the next people God wants to send into your life. God often sends seasonal people to prepare you. They may expose you to new opportunities, challenge your thinking, or even teach you resilience through hardship. Once their assignment is complete, God redirects them or redirects you. The relationship ends not because it was meaningless, but because its meaning was already accomplished. Looking back, you can often see that their presence helped shape you in ways you would have missed without them. The pain comes when we try to turn what was only meant to be temporary into something permanent, mistaking lessons for lifelong bonds. This truth is especially important in matters of the heart. Many people enter into romantic relationships believing every spark of connection is a covenant promise, only to face heartbreak when it ends. But not every romantic connection is meant for marriage. Sometimes God allows the relationship to begin simply to reveal more about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your values. It can prepare you for the one He has truly chosen for your life. Understanding this helps you grieve without bitterness because you realize the relationship had a purpose even if it did not have permanence. Consider the example of a young woman who entered college and formed a deep friendship with a classmate. They were inseparable, studying together, laughing together, and even planning future dreams side by side. She assumed this friend would be with her for life. But after graduation, their paths diverged. The friend moved to another country, became consumed with her new career, and their communication slowly faded. At first, the young woman felt abandoned and hurt. But as time went on, she realized that the friendship had served its purpose. That friend had helped her navigate a difficult season of transition, given her confidence to pursue her studies, and provided support during years when she was vulnerable and unsure. The friendship was not meant to be lifelong, but it was vital for the season. Without it, she may not have had the courage to move forward. The relationship ended, but its impact endured. This example shows that not every ending is a tragedy. Some endings are simply the natural conclusion of a season. When we understand this, we can release people with gratitude instead of resentment. We can thank God for the role they played Bless them as they move on and step boldly into the new connections God is bringing. It is far better to release a seasonal person than to cling to them and miss the covenant relationships God has waiting. Learning to recognize the difference between seasonal and covenant relationships brings peace. You stop forcing what no longer fits. You stop blaming yourself for endings that were never meant to be avoided. And you begin to trust that God is the master author of your story, writing people in and out at the right time. Every character has a role, and when their part is finished, the story continues with new faces who are meant to walk with you further. Not every relationship is covenant, but every relationship has purpose. Accepting that truth allows you to move forward with gratitude, trust, and hope for what lies ahead. When a relationship comes to an end, it can feel like the entire foundation of your life has been shaken. You may have built dreams around that person, imagined a future together, or even anchored your identity in the connection. So when the relationship suddenly ends, it feels like the closing of a door that once led to joy, comfort, and security. But what seems like a devastating ending is often God's way of redirecting you towards something greater. Endings in God's hands are never final. They are simply transitions. A closed door is not the end of your story, but a turning point where God shifts you onto a path more aligned with His purpose for your life. God never wastes an ending. What feels like rejection is often protection, and what feels like loss is often redirection. He knows where each step of your journey will lead, and He knows the consequences of remaining tied to people who cannot walk with you into your destiny. When He allows a relationship to end, He is not leaving you empty-handed. He is guiding you away from what no longer fits so He can position you for what will. The redirection may not make sense at first because you are looking through the lens of immediate pain, but in time, His purpose becomes clearer. Endings are often divine signposts. They mark the moment when God says, "This chapter is complete, and now I am turning the page." If we resist His hand, we remain stuck in the past, clinging to what was unable to embrace what is coming. But when we trust that His plan is good, we begin to see endings not as death, but as transformation. A door closing in one direction means there is another opening somewhere else, and God, in His sovereignty, ensures that the new door leads closer to the calling He placed on your life. Sometimes divine redirection is necessary because you would never leave on your own. If God allowed every relationship to continue, you might stay comfortable in places that limit your growth. He knows that your destiny cannot be fulfilled in environments that no longer serve you. So He closes doors to push you into motion. What feels like disruption is actually grace. He unsettles you so you do not settle for less. He ends relationships so you can discover the people, opportunities, and experiences that truly align with your future. This redirection is not just about finding better people. It is about finding your rightful path. When the wrong relationship ends, it frees your energy, your heart, and your focus to pursue the right calling. Suddenly, you have space to see what God has been whispering all along. You realize that the door you wanted so badly was never the one meant for you. His redirection saves you from wasting years in places that would never fulfill your soul. Consider the example of a man who was deeply in love with his long-term partner. They dated for years, and he assumed marriage was inevitable. But one day, without warning, she ended the relationship. He was shattered. All his plans crumbled, and he felt abandoned by both her and God. For months, he struggled with bitterness, questioning why such pain had been allowed. Yet, in the quiet of that season, he began to rediscover himself. He poured his energy into pursuing dreams he had once put aside for the relationship. Eventually, his career took off, leading him into circles of influence he never expected. It was in that new environment that he met someone who not only loved him, but shared his values and supported his vision. Looking back, he realized that had the first relationship continued, he would have settled into a life far smaller than what God had intended. The ending, though brutal at the time, was the redirection that aligned him with his true calling. This is how God works. He closes doors not to punish, but to protect, not to abandon, but to guide. Endings are not the conclusion of your story. They are divine redirections leading you closer to the destiny written for you before time began. You may not see it today, But one day you will look back and thank him for every closed door, every goodbye, and every ending that pushed you forward. So when a relationship ends, do not despair. Lift your eyes and trust that God is still writing. The pen is in his hand, and he is not finished with your story. The chapter that feels like loss is the same chapter that will set the stage for redemption. Trust the redirection, because every ending with God always leads to a greater beginning. Healing after the end of a relationship is one of the hardest journeys a person can walk through. When someone leaves your life, especially someone you invested love, time, and hope into, the wound can feel unbearable. The heart aches with memories, the mind replays every detail, and the soul feels weighed down by questions without answers. In moments like these, people often try to hold on to what is gone, clinging to the past as if keeping it alive will ease the pain. But true healing does not come from holding on. It comes from surrender. When you release what God has taken away and choose to trust him through the tears, you open the door for his peace to flow into your heart. Healing comes through trust. Trust that God sees the bigger picture. Trust that he knows what is best. And trust that he never takes without giving back in greater measure. Trust is not always easy, especially when the loss feels unfair. The human instinct is to control, to try to fix what is broken, to hold on tightly to what brought comfort. But clinging to what God has already removed only prolongs the pain. It keeps you trapped in the past, unable to step into the new season he is preparing. Trust, on the other hand, is an act of surrender. It is saying, God, I do not understand this ending, but I believe you have a purpose. I may not see it now, but I will rest in your wisdom. That posture of surrender is the soil where healing begins to grow. Healing through trust is not instant. It does not erase the hurt overnight. Rather, it allows you to walk through the valley without being consumed by it. Trust gives you the strength to wake up each day and move forward even when the tears still come. Trust enables you to keep your heart soft instead of bitter, to believe that better days are ahead instead of being trapped in despair. Most importantly, trust invites God to do what only he can do, mend the broken pieces of your heart with a peace that surpasses all understanding. When you trust God with your pain, you also begin to see the ending differently. Instead of viewing it as rejection, you begin to see it as redirection. Instead of seeing loss, you begin to see preparation for something greater. Trust shifts your perspective from, why did this happen to me, to what is God doing for me through this? That shift does not remove the sting of the loss, but it transforms the way you carry it. You no longer walk as a victim of heartbreak, but as a child of God being guided into a higher plan. Healing through trust also requires patience. God's timing rarely matches ours, and the restoration he brings often unfolds slowly, layer by layer. But the process is intentional. Every tear you cry is noticed by him. Every silent prayer is heard. And in time, he not only heals the wound, but replaces the emptiness with something greater, stronger faith, deeper peace, and relationships that are healthier and more aligned with your purpose. He never allows you to surrender something without eventually filling your life with something more beautiful. The return may not look exactly like what you lost, but it will always be what you need. An excellent example of this truth can be seen in the life of a man who went through a painful breakup. He had dated his partner for years, and they had built dreams of marriage and family together. When she unexpectedly chose to end the relationship, his entire world collapsed. At first, he could not let go. He tried to reach out, begged for reconciliation, and spent months replaying every mistake he thought he made. The more he held on, the more broken he felt. Finally, after exhausting himself emotionally, he made the decision to surrender it all to God. Each night, through his tears, he prayed, Lord, I don't understand why this happened, but I trust you. Take this pain and help me heal. Slowly, something shifted. The bitterness began to fade, the weight on his chest grew lighter, and peace started to take root where despair once lived. Months later, he realized that the relationship he had clung to was actually holding him back from his true calling. With renewed focus and strength, he began pursuing goals he had long abandoned, and eventually he met someone whose values and vision aligned perfectly with his own. Looking back, he understood that healing only came when he stopped holding on and chose to trust God. That is the power of surrender. Healing is not found in reliving the past or fighting for what God has already removed. Healing is found in trusting the one who writes your story. The God who created your heart knows how to restore it. The one who allowed the ending is the same one who promises that all things will work together for your good. When you place your brokenness in his hands and trust him with the outcome, he exchanges your sorrow for peace and your despair for hope. Healing comes through trust, and with God, trust always leads to restoration. Every time God allows a relationship to end, it is never random. It is never simply to leave you broken, empty, or alone. When he closes the chapter of one connection, it is because he is preparing you for something greater. God is intentional about every detail of your life, and he knows the kinds of people who need to surround you in order for your calling and purpose to flourish. If he ended a relationship, it means that the person who left could not carry the weight of where you are going. It means that they may not have had the capacity to support the future God has planned for you. Endings are not about punishment, they are about preparation. This preparation often feels painful because it involves letting go. Our hearts naturally resist change, and we often struggle with the loss of familiarity. You may think, but I loved them, they were part of my story. How can this be good? Yet God, in his wisdom, knows what you cannot see. He sees the road ahead and knows that to step into your greater calling, you need people who will encourage you, strengthen you, and walk with you faithfully through every trial. The ones who left may have been good for your past, but they were not meant for your future. Their departure is God's way of clearing space for the right people and the right opportunities to enter. Preparation for something greater is like a builder clearing land before constructing a new home. The clearing process looks destructive. The soil is broken, the trees are cut down, and the ground is leveled. To an untrained eye, it looks like loss and chaos. But the builder knows this clearing is necessary to create a strong foundation for what is to come. In the same way, when God ends a relationship, he is making room in your life for a stronger foundation, for a greater future. The temporary emptiness you feel is the space being created for something far better. This preparation also stretches you personally. When a relationship ends, it can leave you with time, energy, and space you didn't have before. God uses that space to grow you, refine your character, and strengthen your dependence on him. You begin to discover resilience you didn't know you had. You gain clarity about your own identity, free from the influence of someone who may not have truly understood your calling. That personal preparation is essential because before God can bring the right people into your life, he often needs to first make you ready to receive them. God is not only preparing you, but he is also preparing others who will walk with you. Somewhere down the road, there are people who are being shaped right now to stand by your side, to pray with you, to dream with you, and to support the assignment God has placed on your life. You may not see them yet, but just as he is working in you, he is also working in them. The timing of relationships in God's plan is perfect. He aligns hearts and paths at the exact moment when they will bear the most fruit. An excellent example of this can be seen in the story of a woman who once thought she had found the love of her life. She was engaged, and everything seemed set for marriage. But just months before the wedding, the relationship ended abruptly. She was devastated, convinced her life had fallen apart. In her grief, she poured her heart out to God and began to rebuild her life piece by piece. In that season, she discovered hidden talents, pursued her career dreams, and grew deeper in her faith. Years later, she met a man who not only loved her, but also shared her spiritual vision and supported her calling. Together, they built a family and ministry that impacted countless lives. Looking back, she realized that had her first relationship continued, she might never have stepped into the fullness of her calling. The heartbreak was preparation. It cleared space for a partnership that was not just about love, but about purpose. This is the essence of God's preparation. What feels like devastation today can turn into testimony tomorrow. The relationship that ended is not the end of your story. It is the pruning that allows your life to bear more fruit. When God removes someone, it is not to reduce you, but to position you for increase. He prepares you for greater relationships, greater opportunities, and greater blessings than you could have imagined. So if you find yourself standing in the ashes of an ended relationship, lift your eyes. Trust that God is not finished with you. The empty space in your life is not a void. It is preparation. It is God's way of readying you for people who will truly walk with you, for opportunities that will stretch you higher, and for blessings that will fill your heart in ways you never thought possible. Every ending in his hand is not loss. It is the first step into something greater. So if you are walking through the pain of a relationship ending, lift your head. Do not stay in regret or bitterness. God is not subtracting to leave you empty. He is clearing the path to fill you with more. Trust him even in the silence, even in the ache. The one who authored your story knows every chapter. And if a character had to leave, it means the next chapter is about to reveal something better. Remember this: when God ends a relationship, it is never rejection. It is redirection toward the destiny he created you for. Walk forward with hope, because the best is not behind you. The best is still to come.